Welcome to Live the Final Third with Stephen Kilbreath. More life, more stories, and more ahead. Through hopeful, honest conversations, we'll talk with people turning experience into purpose, connection, and impact. These are real stories from real people creating real momentum. Live the Final Third shines a light on people using experience, curiosity, and heart to make a difference in this season of life, including some familiar voices from Stephen's years in the media business. Because the Final Third might just be the best one yet.
Hey there, welcome to the Live the Final Third podcast. I'm Stephen Kilbreath. Thanks for watching or listening or however you're getting the podcast. Hopefully you're now starting to kind of understand what the whole concept is here of Live the Final Third, where we talk about the first third of your life, the middle third of your life, and for those of us like me in the final third of our life, what are we doing that's making a difference? What impact are we making? What are we doing for ourselves? And it's not really about, oh my gosh, this is great. This is what I'm doing. I'm saving kids now or doing that. If you are, that's awesome. And we appreciate the work that you're doing. But I'm just saying it's like, it's time to live your life. We don't have, you have a third of your life left. Let's make the most of it we can for ourselves. And it's not about being selfish. It's about living the life that you want to live. And so that's what we talk about on here. We have some great guests. And today we're going to be talking to Steve Bunin, a friend of mine I've known for a long time. He worked at King 5. But before we get there, I just want to remind you that if you know of somebody who has a great story, like a great redemption story, a rise from the ashes story, a story of somebody that's really making an impact or living the final third to the fullest, I want to hear about it. So make sure that you email us through the website, livethefinalthird.com. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Live the Final Third. It's pretty easy. That's our information throughout all of the socials and everything like that. So we want to start talking to some great guests. Part of the show is friends of mine from the media business, like we're going to hear from Steve today, telling stories about how the business has changed and things that are going on in that sense, and kind of how their lives have changed and how they've had to transform into different careers and things like that once the media is done. So we have stories like that, but the other stories are people who are just people I know, people that you tell me about, that I want to hear from, because one of my favorite country songs is called Famous Friends. And it goes, I've got some famous friends that you've never heard of. But what that means is I believe everybody has a story, and I believe everybody's story is important and worth telling. So if you know of somebody that could be a great guest or a potential somebody on the show, we'd love to hear from them. I know that I'm going to try to get my mom on. We're going to talk to some commercial fishermen, because that's the life that my dad lived. We're going to talk to, and they don't have to be, older like me. They can be young folks and talking about people in their 20s or 30s or 40s or whatever in kind of different things, the impacts that they're making in their lives. So all of that is just to be said to follow us on the socials and go to the website and make sure that you suggest a guest if there's something that you, somebody that you think would be a great guest, and also follow us on all that stuff. And it would be great. It would be great to have some feedback, and it'd be great to have feedback on whether you think we're doing an okay job. So you can do that through the website as well, although I only want positive feedback. So there you go, because, but of course my therapist wants the negative feedback, because then they can get another car. Anyway, but enough about that. Let's do this. Let's go into Steve Bunin, who is now the only executive communications coach with TV network experience. He is a 6-time Emmy nominee. He's best known for his 9-year stint at ESPN, locally for his 6-year run at King 5, and he also, if you can believe it, has won 5 Emmys. I was nominated once. I didn't win, but Steve Bunin has 5 Emmys. Oh my goodness, like 5 Emmy Awards? How do you carry all of those, Steve? What's the deal with that?
We got 2 in the background. It's just enough to be show-offy, but not too arrogant. Probably it's too many, though.
That's awesome, though. That's great. Steve and I met at King 5. Steve was an anchor there, and we actually did the noon show. I did weather, and you were anchoring, almost a year, kind of off and on doing that noon show. That was a lot of fun working with you.
I like to say carrying you, but we had a great time working here. No, you and I I think we see the world a lot in the same way. I think we see journalism the same way, and we see the presentation of the news the same way. So a lot of the things that you were passionate about, which is reaching out small town, local forecasts, like really pinpointing that. And I was doing the same with the segment we called Above the Fold, where we'd highlight a local newspaper all over the state of Washington. I think, we got along, swimmingly, but I think our on-air demeanor and our on-air sort of philosophies meshed really well, and it made it for a great watch for the viewers.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, you and I both commented about how we did get comments from viewers when we were out and about regarding both of those segments that you're talking about. And I just think the personality that you could see through that. Why do you think the business doesn't value that as much as you and I do, and as much as maybe the viewers do?
I don't know. I think it's a big mistake. I said from day one when I got there, I was always pushing for us to do more sort of hyper local, and we did do that in some parts. And I applaud King 5 for doing that, because not all stations do. But it's hard. It's hard to reach out to drive to far communities way that are smaller. You do have to sort of play to the masses. I think that's, the major population in the Seattle metro area is Seattle, so the bulk of the news probably should go to there. I think that's fair, but I think there are ways to do it. And frankly, in weather, traffic, and in a segment like Above the Fold, that's a way you can do it with minimal effort. You don't have to drive a photographer or reporter out to a city 2 hours away when you're not going to get that much, bang for the buck. Whereas the things that you and I did, you get a lot of bang for the buck. And what I would have loved to see is a lot more sort of thrust of the station promotion department and marketing behind that, so that you can embrace it, bring people into the studio, really make an effort that people out there will know that in all the small towns they'll be recognized, because it matters. It's also one of the reasons, not that you asked, but why the death of the local newspaper to me is so heartbreaking, because there is no way for the Seattle Times or Washington Post in DC to cover a little suburb. It's just not possible. There isn't the manpower. And without local newspapers, no one covers the news there. And having grown up in a sort of small town near Seattle, I love getting the local newspaper. It's why I fell in love probably with journalism at such a young age.
And it's like local radio is the same way, I would argue, because I went to college for my first 2 years in Port Angeles, and really it was one of the only stations you could actually hear in Port Angeles. And you did the country store, where for 2 hours you're talking about people selling stuff and all of that kind of stuff. And they can't afford it anymore to do it that way. But it's the same, akin to the local newspaper is what I think. You talked about growing up. Where were you born, and where did you grow up?
So born in Seattle and grew up in Mercer Island, Washington. I like to say, for people who are listening locally that know kind of what Mercer Island is, which is sort of like the Beverly Hills of Seattle, I always say my parents moved there in 1970 when it was just an island. It wasn't what it sort of became. But no, I was really proud to grow up there. Great place to grow up. I have 3 brothers, and so we had kind of a rambunctious house, as you can kind of imagine. And it was my mom who had such a love for sports that I think sort of infused me with that. And so we grew up in a sports loving house, playing, running around, slamming into each other and into the walls. And always kind of wanted to come back. I remember going to college. I want to get out of here. And first semester, I went to Syracuse University in upstate New York. Not just the weather that was freezing, but I just realized how special it is in Seattle. So I always had a hope that I could get back in my career, and eventually I did.
Yeah, what's funny, in 1970, or in the 70s, I should say, on Mercer Island, it was probably like, oh my gosh, you live all the way over there? That's probably what people thought. And now I live in Snoqualmie, and it's like, you live all the way out there. But yeah, I mean, it's, really only 25 minutes into Seattle. And in the big spectrum of things, it could take you from, not that you live on Mercer Island now, I think you live in Seattle now, but it could take 25 minutes just to get from Mercer Island to Seattle. So, that's just kind of how it goes. So the concept of what we're doing here, I know you and I had lunch a couple weeks ago and talked about, the final third, about how the beginning of your life, you're just kind of you're learning who you are and all of that. And then the second third is like your career and, family, if that's the path you choose. And then the final third, and I don't know, I know you're not as old as I am, but I would say that
not nearly, let's clarify that, not nearly as old as you are.
Not nearly as old. I mean, we may be a generation apart. I don't know. Yeah, but what it is that what I loved about you and your story is that what I feel is that people should do when they get to a certain age, or the final third, or whatever you want to call it, is it's time to what is your passion? What are you going to do? Why are we in jobs we don't want to be in? Why are we doing things we don't want to do? Why are we friends with people that aren't building us up and things like that? And what I love is the coaching. I mean, tell me a little bit about, I know you have, I'm going to talk about, 2 coaching, I guess, the basketball and the executive coaching. First off, I guess we got to backtrack a little bit. So you worked at King 5 for what, 5 or 6 years, right?
Yeah, 6 years at King.
Or was it 6 or 7? I don't know. But anyway,
Just six, just a straight six. I wanted it to be 7. I don't mind saying, like, I've always thought I would be in TV forever. Even in my late 40s, I remember saying to people around the King 5 newsroom, off the air, of course, like, I'll be the dinosaur that's doing this till I'm 60, 70, 80, and then I'm going to stop. I don't know how to do anything else. It's all I wanted to do since I was a kid was be a sportscaster and then a newscaster. And, but sort of in this I had a tough time in my career. And so I was moving a lot and in these small cities where I didn't know anyone. I sort of fell into coaching youth basketball and also into being a big brother. So these two things, I'd move to a city and I'd do one or the other or both. And then in a couple of years, I'd move on and then sort of, rinse and repeat that 4 or 5 times. And mentoring, I look back and I realized I didn't know it at the time, but mentoring sort of became a big part of my life. And even then when I was a little older in TV, 40, and I get to King 5 and I took it upon myself to just help younger reporters or anchors or producers, anyone who was open for advice. I'm happy to give it. I mean, maybe I came off as a know-it-all, but I'd had this career where I'd been at a national network and I was always eager and happy to share. And
I will say, I think the way you approached that and wanting to help people, I mean, I feel, and I know I would assume other people feel this way. I think it came from a genuine place of just, we want to raise everybody up and everybody be not saying that the way you do it is the right way, just saying, this is how the industry should be. I mean, that comes from a place inside.
And in TV, I mean, I wouldn't deny it either. A little self-serving. Like we look better as a station if everyone here is up to the level that I hope we can be at. And not saying that I know everything, but I do. No, I just feel like if I can be a help, and I would say, in one ear out the other if you don't like my advice. But the mentorship, and especially of kids and teens, I did a lot of work with at-risk youth or kids who come from pretty rough backgrounds without usually, in my experience, boys who didn't have a dad. That was a pretty common sort of a kid that I would end up working with. And just became a huge part of my life. And so I had coached some high school basketball teams along the way. I started with, like I mentioned, youth kids up to middle school and then high school. But in TV, it's pretty cutthroat. Your schedule can be really all over the place. And so it was never something that I kind of thought I'd be able to do full time if I was in television. And I was okay with that. But yeah, in terms of like, when did I make that King 5 made the choice not to bring me back. I would have signed another contract.
Right. And that's what's interesting is that, when you get to that crossroads, I mean, and we haven't even touched on it, but you were at ESPN for a long time. And so doing stuff with ESPN and the sports world, we'll come back to that if we have the time for it. And then it was and then there was some other stations here. And then King 5 was the most recent one where we met in your hometown, which is probably pretty cool. And then they don't re-sign you. What's the first thought that goes through your mind when that happens?
So I kind of felt it was coming. I had been around long enough to know that if they don't approach you after a certain time, like they're not coming back. And also because previously I'd had contracts redone there where it had come on a certain timeline. So I wasn't shocked, definitely disappointed. And I thought, frankly, it wasn't a great decision. I mean, I'm not, I hope it doesn't come off as totally braggadatory, but I had done a pretty good job. I'm a local kid. They put a decent amount of marketing into me when I came back because it's pretty rare to get a Seattle, anchor who had achieved at a certain level. So anyway, and frankly, I looked at other stations in town and I had some offers, but they weren't offers that were really satisfying to me. And so I started to then ask, really good friends of mine who I really trust, people and who I love, and in different parts of industries, different, and it kind of came back to like PR, communications, and I was like, nah. And then one friend of mine, he was a teenager I coached in high school basketball 30 years ago, and I was an entrepreneur. And he was like, you're this great coach. He still calls me coach. You're this great coach, and you have all this TV expertise and storytelling, communications, and that's really missing in a lot of businesses in the business world with executives. What about being an executive coach? I hadn't even thought of the term. I mean, I'd heard of it, but so that was, and then within a few days, I'd sort of decided to do it, and then on top of that, decided to go off on my own and start it. So it was not something I would have planned, but I'm glad I did because then it did allow me to do those things you're talking about in my final third. Or God willing, final half. But I'm 51, about to be 52 at the time of this taping. And now I feel like, I had this incredibly lucky and not. I mean, I worked hard, but I had a really blessed 25 years, quarter century in TV, and I'm hoping that I can have the same sort of feeling about coaching. And just 3 years in, I already do.
Yeah. Well, two things. First, final third is based on the average lifespan, which is 75. But the older we get, the age, the lifespan does increase. So you're right about that. And
I'm hoping.
and I'm not saying that right at 75, you and I are just going to drop dead. That's
I hope
definitely
not. Yeah.
not in the plans. But so the executive coaching thing, which is awesome. I follow it on LinkedIn, and of course, in talking with you about it. What's one thing about that has surprised you that you've really leaned into it, and you're like, oh my gosh, this. I mean, I don't even really miss the TV anymore.
The lack of the thing that surprises me is the lack of training that people have. I realize it now. Like, I don't have any training in medicine, so if you ask me to do a surgery, I have zero chance. But if you ask me to put on a Band-Aid, I can do that. But at high levels of business that people just haven't had any sort of training. That's really, and that's, I found that law enforcement, sports, business, tech, lots of different industries. So that's been I'd say the most surprising thing is that I thought I'd have more like, oh, I did this a couple of times and it wasn't good. And I've had that experience, but for the most part, I get a lot of like, yeah, I've never had any sort of training, or the training I had was so rudimentary that it wasn't helpful, or so many years ago. And then I just to say the feeling that I get from doing it. So then being able to help someone learn something about why are they nervous when they talk? Why, when they're doing a PowerPoint presentation, is it convoluted and it feels boring to everyone? And I heard this from a few clients, death by PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And like, I can barely make a PowerPoint because I can do all the graphics in TV. You and I, have to create graphics, weather, traffic, sport. I can do that, but not in the business world.
Right.
And so there are a lot of things that I had to learn that were huge, very steep curves. And I'm still learning, honestly. But I would say that feeling of having someone go, I never thought about it that way. This is so much better. That's a great feeling. And I loved TV. And again, I would have done it forever. And I got a lot of great reward out of that, but it was a little more intrinsic as opposed to this, which is like someone tells you how much you've helped them. That means a lot to me.
Yeah. And so tell us about the basketball team. I know that's kind of where the heart is at this moment.
That's a big passion of mine too. So like I mentioned, I got into youth coaching totally on accident. A dude I played basketball with was like, hey, I need some help with the 9-year-olds. Can I help at the YMCA in Flagstaff, Arizona, 1997, living La Vida Loca. And so I said, sure. And I just loved it. I found out that I loved it and really bonded with a couple of the kids who happen to not have a dad in their lives. And so I became really close with them. And then that sort of grew and grew and grew as the years went by. So over the years, I had coached a couple of high school basketball teams, but just for a season, because at ESPN, I had a couple of years where I was working a morning shift consistently, so I could do it at night. But other times at ESPN, your shift is all over the place. And as you know, in local TV, it can be like that too. So, and especially if you're working evenings, it's just impossible. So anyway, once I was not working at King, I was able to do this little school on Mercer Island, Washington, my hometown, the little small Jewish school called Northwest Yeshiva High School, had an opening. They asked if I could do it. I did, and I love it. We're the smallest schools. There's 6 classifications in Washington State of schools. We're the tiniest, so a bunch of little schools. It's a little bit like Hoosiers, for those of you old enough to remember the movie, where it's like there's 60 kids in the school, half boys. Of the boys, 2/3 are in the basketball program, and I just love it. It fills my heart in a way that's kind of hard to describe. Coming off a tough overtime loss last night, so a little hoarse, but I just love it. The van rides, to the games, the practices, even the frustrating parts are hard in the moment, but the whole journey every season is just wonderful. And then you see kids graduate, like you had them for 2, 3, 4 years, and that's a really special feeling to know that you've been such a big, hopefully, part of their lives in a positive way.
It was interesting when we were talking about this, and there's the big schools like where I live, Mount Si. They've won 4 King Co championships in a row and things like that. And there's I think Anacortes won a state championship or was in it recently in my hometown and all that kind of stuff. And that's a 2A school. But when you were describing how you coach and what you do with the men on the team, or the boys on the team, or however you say it. It really is impactful how much the coach can make a difference, right?
The basketball should be the secondary. To me, coaching is about trying to help mold, in my case, young men or young women, if you're coaching women, into more responsible teenagers. I have a line that I use with a lot of my boys. I call them my boys. I want you to get from young teenager to old teenager. By the time I'm done with you, like 13, 14, where it's much more about you and parents have done everything for you, whether that's laundry or making your food or making sure you've done homework, to when you're 16, 17, 18, I call it old teenager, like more responsible, do your own thing. It's consequences for your actions if you're not on time. So I'm real big on punctuality. My team wears a necktie to school on game days. in part just because that's how I was at my high school, at Mercer Island High School. That's what we would do on game days. And in part because I think it's a nice thing. It helps them learn, like, okay, in the business world, maybe not for everyone, but a lot of people have to wear a tie. If you're a young man, you know how to tie a tie. Plenty of moms and dads have taught them. Some haven't. It's great. So things like that, punctuality, respect for elders, respect when we go into another gym. We don't leave crumbs in the bleachers. All those things are much more important to me than whether or not we run a box and 1 or a 2-3. And don't get me wrong, I spend tons of time and stress and lose lots of hair over all that stuff too. And I want to in every game. I'm super competitive. But I tried to tell them, I tell the parents and the kids at the start of every year, my coaching philosophy is, half discipline, half love. And the goal is not that we win. The goal is to win state of year. But realistically, the goal is that more of your kids than not invite me to their wedding or call me coach when they're 50. Like that's what I'll define as, was I a good coach?
So during your time at ESPN, it kind of really fascinates me, that network and how they run things. And I don't really have a knowledge of that. How do you feel it's different now than when you were there? And what was your role when you were there?
So one of the biggest ways it's different is the anchors there are now not only allowed to, but encouraged to kind of be fans on the air. Hey, I'm from Kansas City. I can't believe the Chiefs won. Let's go to the highlights. And that was absolutely forbidden when I was there. In fact, you would get in trouble if you did anything like that. If you mentioned, my hometown Huskies or something like that. So that's, I would say, one of the big differences. My role was primarily.
Why do you think they changed that? I think
they realized with social media, like everyone kind of knows everything about everyone, and it's more authentic.
Yeah, for sure.
I do think there's a place for objectivity, and I think in sports it's much different than news or entertainment. But some of us were pushing for that we'll be able to connect with fans more, and you won't turn someone off. Sure, now you get a ton of heat if Steve's just a Seahawks fan. You'll get that, but I think that it's worth the trade-off because you gain so much authenticity, and then you have the heartbreak when your team doesn't make it. As long as the anchors, and I think they do at ESPN, can be professional when they're doing a highlight, because that's not everyone can do that, and you see that sometimes from the local level where it becomes very much like you're a fanboy, and that's not journalism. So I think that the responsibility is a big one, and I think that for the most part they do it pretty well. So my role was as an anchor. I did a variety of shows. I was kind of, you might call a utility man. I did Sports Center and ESPN News. The show I did the most was probably Outside the Lines, it's like investigative, kind of like 60 minutes, longer form journalism, which kind of portended, I guess, my transition to news journalism after a few years after leaving ESPN. And I loved it. I idolized those guys when I was a teenager and in college. And I had buddies when I went to Syracuse who would go visit it at the campus. And I never did. I always said to myself, I want to be invited to get there. I wanted to get the job interview. And then I got the job interview. I was working in Kalamazoo, Michigan, in this former military barracks, Fort Custer, I believe it was, that had been transformed into a TV station, making like $28,000 a year. And I'm 29, career is kind of going nowhere. But I believed in myself. I really did. And I doubled down in that last year, just things that happened in my life that I'm just going to kind of go for it. And then, of course, in the weird twist of fate, there was a job I wanted in Seattle at Fox Sports Northwest at the time. And I was desperate for it. I'll be perfect for it. And they didn't choose me. And I was super disappointed. And then a couple months later, I got the job at ESPN. And it was one of these classic, sliding doors. You never know what would happen. But anyway, so it was 9 great years there. I did tons of different shows, got to work with incredible people, Dick Vitale, among other, being the most famous, and a million on down. It was exactly the culmination of the dream that you wanted, which is everyone is totally all in to do one show and make it great, and then come back and do it again tomorrow. And you've got high level people at every, director, producer, graphics, executive producer, anchor, reporter, assignment. Every part of the machine is really high level, and that makes it really special and made it really fun. And especially when the stakes are highest. Whether that was, a big moment, NBA Finals, or an athlete dies, or someone gets hit for steroids, whatever it was, that kind of a feeling, that juice in a newsroom there's nothing like that. And that's why I loved it so much. I always say, like, there's about 40 anchors at a time at ESPN. If you ever put us, ranked us most famous to least famous, I'd be on the lower end. Expert, I know every statistic about every team in all of Major League Baseball, I'd be at the end of the line. But if you lined us up on who enjoyed his time most there, I'd be right at top, or near the top, because I've been through such a hard time in my 20s to get there. I really, really appreciated and valued it, and I still feel that way now.
They have they're more of a kind of a skeleton crew now, aren't they?
Still pretty sizable compared to any other experience that you'd have in journalism. But they've had lots of layoffs, and they've definitely transitioned because it's a little bit of follow the money. But if you can create, ratings, frankly, you're going to get paid. And so the guys who can do that, Stephen A. Smith and Pat McAfee, get paid much more than the anchors. And even the top anchors, they'll do really well. The middle and lower rank anchors, which I was proudly a part of, do not do so well financially. But still, it was ESPN, and so you're happy to be there.
What do you think of the bombastic style, if you will, of like Stephen A. Smith and Pat McAfee? I mean, that goes back to when you were saying earlier that everybody just had to be, you didn't know who you cheered for. You were just straight reading the news. And now, of course, those guys are the ones that everybody knows.
The lines got blurred. I mean, it's a different format, I think, talk, it's sort of like talk radio in a sense versus news radio. And it's the same thing in sports. So I always say, I think it's important to delineate between those two. And what's happened, though, is the line has been super blurred. And so it's not my style, but I do love the sports bar argument of who's better, MJ or LeBron. Like, that's never left my DNA. So I totally understand why. And that rates. And that happened at ESPN News. Sometimes they'd usurp us. That was like the 24-hour, always Sports Center on us all the time. And occasionally they would pop in PTI or Around the Horn, and the ratings would triple. And I remember thinking, oh, God, that's not good for us. And it wasn't. And within a few years, ESPN News had sort of ceased to exist as it had, because the news service as it wasn't as valuable as, people debating about sports. So it's not my biggest cup of tea, but it is what it is. It's the way of the world. And if people want different sorts of journalism, they have to go different places to find it.
Well, and there's the line is blurred, and it's definitely the loudest is the one that gets through, and all of that kind of stuff. So by the way, the answer to the question is MJ, right? Don't you think?
No, I think it's LeBron, but that'll have to be at a different podcast.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. That's something. All right. Well,
I have lots of evidence to back it up. It's not just my opinion, but it's a great debate.
My children would agree with you, but they weren't alive during MJ, so that's the other part of that. So what are you doing now that you wish you'd started sooner, like in your life?
It's funny because I don't really have any regrets about what I kind of wish I did. I remember even like at ESPN trying to really appreciate the moments and all my stops along the way. I guess now I'm glad that I have the chance to make my own schedule. As opposed to when you're in TV, you're tethered to the schedule that they switch you from the noon show to the 5 a.m. show. You can quit or you can do it. And that can mess up your life. And that happened to me. And again, I signed up for it, happy to do it, and would have done it all over again. But I like the fact that now I get to choose my own schedule.
What are you most proud of?
I guess my resilience. I mean, I got rejected for probably, maybe not 1,000, but hundreds of jobs in television. Just, sending out in the old days videotapes on VHS tapes, walking in a post office. It wasn't like send a link to the station in Tupelo, Mississippi, or Laredo, Texas, or Zanesville, Ohio. I got rejected for hundreds and hundreds of jobs, and I just kept at it. I had a belief in myself. I knew I had some talent, and I just wasn't getting breaks. And there's some luck that goes into it to get to a place like ESPN, and then with King 5 and the Emmys and all that stuff. But I do think that it takes a lot of resilience, and you got to be able to hear the word no and say, "That's okay. You don't believe in me. I believe in me." So I guess if anything, I'm proud that I had that.
If a TV station calls tomorrow, what are you saying to them?
Oh, and say with an offer, thanks, but no thanks. Did it? It sort of happened to me, and I'm at a different place. In part because even though it didn't end the exact way that I wanted, because I didn't get to make the call, I had the career that I wanted. And I thought about that a lot. Like, I can't really do anything else. We thought about it as a family. Do we move to Phoenix or move to Cleveland or take a different job in Seattle? Like, I had done it. I'm not the greatest ever, but I was at a national network. I was at ESPN. I got to do news in my local. I made the transition from sports to news, which a lot of people, including some at King 5, didn't think I was going to do early on. I had some people in the hallway. Didn't you just do sports? And I'm really proud. Like, I was there for 6 years. I got 6 nominations for Best News Anchor. It doesn't mean everything, but it means something. And I'm really proud of that. Only won, but it just sort of validated, like, I can do this, and I'm not, that I had earned it, and I was proud about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now is the time where, just tell us, about this is the self-promotion portion of the program. So
isn't the whole thing self-promotion? Like when I'm on, that's what no. Well, look, what I tell my clients is, like, there's lots of communications coaches out there, people that'll help you try to communicate better. And I can't speak for any one of them. I just think I'm lucky that I have these two things kind of going for me. One is a career that did take me from small markets where you have to do everything on your own and nobody's watching, to national networks where people are watching you all over the world, and in airplanes and hotels and bars and all that stuff. And there aren't many coaches who have that. And then of the coaches who have some level of similar success, I just know that I'm a good coach. I'm not great at a lot of things. Can't fix a car. Can't move things. I can coach. It's just something that I think, born with, and so it's hard to find someone who can do both of those things. So if you are watching this and you think, God, if I could just, my boss has told me, or if I could just speak better in public, or at the conference in Vegas or in Memphis when I have to go speak in front of, I get so nervous. I can help you with that. That's kind of what you do in television. You storytell, you compartmentalize, you try to tell the most important things in the right order, and then get in and get out in 90 seconds. And then that translates to a lot of business, fundraising, moving up in the boardroom. So those are the things that I feel like I can help with. And if you can find somebody else, great. Doesn't have to be me, but I would say, even Tom Brady had a quarterbacks coach. Like, unless you've been in TV for 25 years, I feel like help you with something in communication. So if that suits you, look me up. That'd be fantastic.
What I like is if you're watching this, you should also say, and you made it this far into the
to the few who are still with us.
Yes. My mother will contact you, I'm sure, if she figures out how to hit the link to begin with. But yes, and maybe we can offer your services to a few politicians. So I'm just kidding, but yeah, that would be open
something. To helping anyone. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah. That's great. Well, Steve, I really enjoy you and the time that we don't get together nearly enough, and I do love it. I wish you luck with the team this year, and I'm gonna be wearing one of those sweatshirts when you make the state tournament this year, and it's gonna be awesome. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a total honor. I love everything that you're doing, and I hope my final third is everything that it can be.
Always fun chatting with Steve. I feel like we can go on for quite a bit longer with that, but certainly awesome to have him as a guest and as a friend too. It's great hearing his career and kind of how the changes in his life have helped make him who he is today, and how that's going to continue. And good luck to the basketball team as well. As you know, Live the Final Third. More stories, more life, more ahead. That's really what we're all about. I want to thank all of you for listening and watching and being a part of the show. Again, email with any questions, or if you have any thoughts, also any guest ideas. I'd love to hear that. I want to thank Olivia with Lou West Creative for helping us out with the everything in the social media world, and of course the website and all that kind of stuff. Trevor, you're awesome. Love you for doing all of this as the executive producer of the podcast and everything. Ascendancy Audio, right? Is that right? Yeah, Ascendancy Audio. I actually knew that. I just wanted you to nod at me and acknowledge me. Anyway, we'll see you next time. Thanks.